Okay, let's see. Let me make sure everyone has been admitted. Yep, looks like it. So welcome everyone. I'm Jenna Franklin. I'm the Division Director for the Equitable Development Initiative in the Office of Planning and Community Development. I just want to let you know that I'm recording the meeting today so that we can share it with folks. If you haven't yet indicated your information in the chat, please add your information in the chat so we have a record of who attended today. And if you're interested in the potential of teaming, feel free to share that. That way other folks on the call can get in touch and talk to you. You can collaborate as desired. And with that, I am going to screen share and just give you a little orientation to this work, the EDI board, and then also where you can access some of the documents noted in the solicitation. So just a minute here, bear with me. All right, is everyone able to see my screen? Great. So there were some documents listed in the solicitation. I just want to show you where you find those. When you visit our website, seattle.gov/OPCD, you'll find the Equitable Development Initiative under Ongoing Initiatives. And you'll see us listed here. And when you visit our section of the website, many of the documents that we're talking about are in these 3 tabs. Information on our advisory board, project documents related to the Equitable Development Initiative, as well as EDI background materials. So I just want to make sure everyone knows how to access those. If they're helpful, you'll have those for reference as you're developing any proposals for this RFQ. And with that, I'm going to walk you through our an overview on the Equitable Development Initiative, the role that our board plays, and the purpose of this RFQ. So the City of Seattle's Equitable Development Initiative is, in its most simplest form, invests public dollars in development projects that are community envisioned and community led. The strategy is part of activating the inclusive growth element of the city's comprehensive plan with a specific racial equity and social justice lens. And it's focused on working with marginalized communities to imagine and envision and then build their own future. This is really a part of the anti-displacement framework, and it is very much about economic empowerment and creating ownership. And I will post this presentation as well after, so folks don't have to worry about taking notes, but effectively, most of our strategies are rooted in community-based solutions that address disparities, and we are guided by the city's comprehensive plan, the Race and Social Justice Initiative, the Equitable Development Implementation Plan that's on our website, which has a financial investment strategy in it, and then critically, our Equitable Development Initiative Advisory Board. Much of what we do internally in this division is provide project management and technical assistance to projects that have been awarded funding. And unlike the Office of Housing, who specifically focuses on funding housing projects, the Equitable Development Initiative focuses on funding projects throughout the equity stream, and specifically with an intent on ownership of commercial, ground floor commercial space, as well as other kind of unique projects such as incubator spaces, food access programs, et cetera, that impact determinants of access to determinants of equity. So the Equitable Development Implementation Plan was created in 2016 by some of the early members of the Equitable Development Initiative Advisory Board when it was in its first iteration. And they created the framework, they defined what systemic change meant, but we recognize this plan is becoming dated. COVID has happened, the city is now in a financial downturn, and so some of what the board will be working on is updating some of these documents over the course of the time that this contract is in place. But nonetheless, it is the framework from which the board is working today, and specifically provides the direction under their ordinance for how they would support implementing direct equitable development projects and the structure of that. The framework is called Strong People, Strong Communities. So when the board works with us, they are looking to achieve these six advance these six specific indicators. And much of the criteria that they use year in and year out for setting their work plan and setting work priorities link to these things. So the purpose of our advisory board, like I said, is to create economic opportunities and ownership opportunities for marginalized communities who are at high risk of displacement in specific high risk areas of Seattle. Every year, the board has sort of an ordinance-driven work plan, and we are in a time of transition, like I noted, and so we're looking for a consultant team that can be responsive to the way the board has worked in the past, but also really help driving sort of a visioning process where the board can re-envision how it fundamentally functions, become more strategic, feel more empowered, have clear initiatives, and make sure that the core functions, such as supporting the RFP process to issue funding awards to community organizations, are maintained. The board also has a desire to have an array of annual events, a convening for Equitable Development Initiative grantees, board retreat, also support in-community activities with grantees that are related to sort of storytelling, engagement, communications, and things like that. And so you see in the RFP that we have reflected that desire for some team to come forward or individuals to come forward in this process who can support this broad array of things, both on a monthly, annual, and as needed basis. This board was, like I noted, built out of community advocacy, as was the entire initiative. They're very rooted in that history. And so we're looking for someone who can really honor the work it took to create this board and EDI overall. We're looking for a team who understands the impact of displacement on community, who is versatile and agile, who's able to reach out and make recommendations to us and the board to help the board become stronger and more impactful, and that has the sensitivity necessary to work with communities who have experienced generations of disparity, discrimination, and marginalization. And so we really feel that, that lens of displacement within marginalized communities who've experienced racism and displacement is essential to being able to functionally work in a collaborative and respectful way with our board. Oh, go back here. So initially it was two groups of folks that came together, this coalition of 21 community organizations, and they built this program from the ground up. It was pretty remarkable. And initially they identified 5 projects and had about $5 million worth of funding that went out. At this point, EDI has an allocation in the budget line item of $25 million a year. However, with the budget deficit being what it is and the source of our funds being subject to recapture, we're not clear about what that will mean going forward. And so we're also looking for a consultant team that can help the board really clarify what they'd like to do with the funds if our fund source shrinks, which we anticipate will happen across the city. It'll be very challenging and difficult for community to absorb that. And so some of the communications that the board might want to lead in, maybe redirecting some of the remaining funds towards technical assistance and capacity building so that they can have a deeper impact, even if they can't award as much money. We're looking for really a thought partner, a strategic partner in this body of work. So it is more than facilitating the meetings. It is really a partner in our work and making sure the board is front and center and helping direct our department. Unlike many other boards and commissions that can be more performative, we do not want a performative board. We want a working board with a meaningful role. And so I think this is going to be active work, and we are going to be reshaping it from the ground up in order to make the board come back to life. There's been a lot of participation fatigue. It's been difficult work. What we're hoping for is support in all ways noted in the scope of work, to be honest, and potentially even more than that. So some of what will happen is we'll be issuing task assignments, and those will be things, related to the scope of work. But we also anticipate that the administration and facilitation consultant will be coming to us making recommendations that we need to respond to. And so I want to reiterate that what we put in the scope of work and the reason we did it as a request for qualifications and an on-call basis is because there's a lot of unknowns, and we are looking for this consultant to actually help us unearth those and find the best path for taking action on them, and understanding that we are financially constrained and need to set priorities, and what does that look like. We do have staff counterparts, but we are operating at about 50% capacity because the city's in a hiring freeze. So we are in, I just want to be very honest, we're in a challenge point. So this partnership is really a part of how our overall initiative, I think, is preserved and set up to grow again once city resources become more plentiful. And so we're looking for that kind of systemic change lens as well. How do you preserve, engage in advocacy? How do you grow equity-based, work that seems to unfortunately always be at risk when times get lean? And we know that that's a difficult position for a consultant team to come into. And so we think it's really important just to be very honest about the challenges that we're all facing, and the need to be really innovative and think outside of the box here. Key things: event work, facilitation work, the structural components of administering a board, from building work plans, initiatives, strategies, down into the actual work product and helping the board figure out, what are they going to commit to from meeting to meeting, and checking in with board members in between meetings. And that's going to be difficult because we have a limited amount of resources. And so the work we do together on the administration side is also about resource planning and allocation of the dollars we have available to work with this consultant. There's regular project management work that will happen. And we want also to think about what we would get out of doing the engagement activities. What are we trying to achieve with the board retreat? What are we trying to achieve with the grantee convening? How does that impact our ability to position EDI through gathering data? We have a lot of data gathering needs. And so all of the strategies also have a reporting back component so that we're able to really leverage every single thing we do as an initiative with our board into things that secure the fund, amplify the board's impact, and ultimately benefit community organizations and the groups that they serve. Let me also reiterate that these tasks we provided because this is our current state. Currently, this board is meeting once a month as a full board, and they have 4 subcommittees. However, we've identified quite a bit of overlap in some of the early iterations of subcommittee work plans, and so we believe that there's a need to consolidate. There's also just a lack of resources on the staff side and the board side that don't make the current configuration of subcommittees really impactful. And so we do anticipate some consolidation, but we're also open to fundamentally rethinking how the board meets altogether. So this really is a current state and how we would get started. And I think some of the early work is actually working with the board to re-envision how it functions fundamentally. Annually, we have the events, the convening, the retreat, And we anticipate some other type of milestone event. The board has noted a desire to have some flexibility. And then we also know that they want to be more present in the community. So some of it would be facilitating, may not be attending, but helping the board organize as they go out to do site visits or host a ribbon cutting or something of that nature, just some of the prep work for the board members to get out and be really prepared, have some talking points, etc. And or submit requests to council members or other electeds to attend with them, for example. Some of the as needed tasks, we have the annual RFP. Again, we don't know when we'll get direction on when we can start that process again, but during the duration of this contract, we do anticipate doing a notice of funding opportunity and running an RFP. That includes also convening a separate panel of community review panel. So we do a recruitment with the board for that. And then we have staff who primarily run that process. However, we would like this consultant to support that work. They want to do more storytelling, communications, and engagement, yet to be fully defined, but that would be things such as blog posts, social media activity, newsletters, general outreach to share stories about project milestones and such. And I will show you a sample project so you can kind of get a sense of what you might be starting with and that. All of the normal things, work plans, agendas, presentations, fact sheets, all of the sort of normal communication collateral we anticipate could come up as needs within this body of work. And also some status and progress reports. How are we advancing work plans? Where are we getting stuck? So some of those regular coordination and issue management items are also anticipated. I've primarily covered most of these items, but these are open and public meetings, and so we want the consultant to be able to support our compliance with open public meetings, which requires that we take notes and post minutes and things of that nature. This board operates, I would say, in the loosest sort of formal structure of a board, in that we just, majority moves an agenda item. We don't really want this to be something where board members feel that they can't participate or join this board if they don't understand rules of order and things of that nature. So we operate in the loosest format, but in order to make sure we are hitting a majority vote. And we also want to make sure that the board liaison, both on the staff side and the consultant side, can help the board following up on the community correspondence component. And so they may be looking for a second reader on things. They may be looking for help drafting a budget memo. They may be, looking for support in those things. And so working directly with board members individually and kind of coaching for what active board participation looks like is going to be really helpful. We also anticipate both in-person and virtual meetings and events. And so there is a provision in the RFQ that asks that the consultants pursuing this are within a reasonable driving distance and can commit over the life of the project to supporting the range of needs, both in person. We would always provide ample notice as we start to do work planning of those in-person events. And currently the regular meetings are happening virtually. And I think the board has an interest in continuing that, but a desire to potentially have more in person to really recenter the relational component and build more in-person connection, which they've identified as potentially a deficit to how they're currently operating. Just for the sake of the record, we've provided some information on the RFP process because it is the sort of most detailed component of what the board does per year. And so, for those who are less familiar with the equity-based grant making process, we wanted to provide this overview, but effectively, we've not done more than 2 RFPs in a year, but we typically do 1. And the board meets and sets criteria, but they also assemble that additional community review panel, which is typically about 20 people. We separate them into groups to deal with conflict of interest. So we're looking for a consultant who can help us maintain that structure when and where we get direction, that we have a pool of dollars that we're able to provide funding around. During the application period, we host information sessions like this. And so there's some virtual event hosting support that we're anticipating, and then organizing the submittals with our staff, and making sure we're developing the packets for every participant, community participant, in order to support their evaluation work. They move through their review process. It can change from year to year. And so when we issue task orders, we be mapping that out. Sorry, I just ran over my dog's tail. Pardon me. It's a little startling. And then we develop a recommendation packet that goes to the mayor's office for review, et cetera. So there's some sort of executive level communications and packaging of materials that we would be looking for support with. And then we send out award letters and move into our project management. And then the board's work in that RFP cycle becomes less active. But that's the typical sort of level of lift on that process, which I would say that and the convenings and then the monthly meetings are the big core elements here. So just to give a sense of the types of projects the board funds, we fund 3 major categories: capacity building, which is typically up to $75,000. Then they fund capital development in 2 main categories: site acquisition, which could be land, it could be a structure, land with a structure that needs some degree of redevelopment, or a whole new development. And then we also provide funding for the capital project development and delivery as the 3rd component. For the Rainier Beach Food Innovation District project, EDI funded $4.8 million over all 3 categories. And so they applied multiple years, were awarded capacity building, site acquisition, and capital project development dollars. And so the board really got to know this, this grantee. And so these are some of the storytelling opportunities we think we have. We want to create an actual inventory and book of all of the projects and be able to provide a profile like this so that we can actually really increase awareness around what the board is funding, and also support them identifying geographic and demographic gaps in funding. And so I think one of the projects we anticipate and that the board really wants to take on is completing a lookbook, if you will, of what's in the EDI portfolio. And so they have a lot of interest, and we know we don't have infinite funds. And so figuring out what is the level of detail and level of effort and where the consultant is best positioned to support us is going to be part of what we would negotiate at every task level, I think. And with that, that is the orientation to where we are as an initiative and the work that the board is doing and hopes to continue doing with this consultant. And I just want to open it up to any questions.
I have 2 questions, and I have to jump off at 3:30, so I'm going to jump right in.
Okay.
One is for the minimum qualifications. If the prime consultant is located in Seattle, but is working with sub-consultants outside of Seattle, would that meet the minimum requirement?
As long as you're demonstrating sufficient capacity to support both the virtual and in-person. And fundamentally what we know we have limited resources, and we know we need to be responsive to emerging needs. And so we're looking for what that blend would look like. And we're also aware that, distance travel eats into our dollars spent on functional board work and activities. And so we're trying to strike a balance. And so that is why in the RFP, some understanding of your rates is necessary for us to make the evaluation.
Okay, and then my second question is, I saw that the compensation for board members does not come from the contract amount, but I was wondering if there's any other expenses that you foresee needing to come from the contract amount, like cost related to in-person convenings or things like interpretation or translation. Is it, I suppose, is the contract meant to be primarily consulting fees, or are there any big expenses that you would like to be part of the budget amount?
We would like for you to propose some portion for direct expenses and just clarify to us what those are. However, things like facility rentals, translation interpretation needs, pass-through funding to CBOs, community-based organizations who might help us with a convening, those sorts of things we are not asking you to include at this time. We will preserve additional dollars for those. We wanted to keep the contracting a little more clean, but we know that each consultant will have their own hard reimbursable costs. And so just if you can determine upfront what you're proposing those would be, we understand that new things will come up, but we'd like to get a sense, what you're including in your cost and pricing and what you're not. And that's not to say that it's, a hard and fixed, because we don't know all of the activities, but it gives us a sense of what your fully loaded rate includes and what kinds of things you're anticipating and what you're not.
Got it. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions I can answer?
Hi, Jenna.
Hi.
Does the makeup of the board change within the year?
Great question. Yes, so the board has a mix of participants, and we are actually in the process of cleaning up the appointment durations through an ordinance change. However, it's a mix of council, mayor, and board recommended appointments, and they serve in 2-year terms with the option to renew once. So each year there are board members that roll off, and we would be working with the consultant when those happen to support our recruitment process, which could be drafting posts for social media and communications and things like that, or sending an email blast, to other community organizations, etc. So there is transition that we do anticipate. We struggle to some extent, I think, for the reasons I've talked about with the level of participation. And so there is a need, when we re-envision how this board can be more functional, to look at the bylaws and sort of talk about, the board has been reluctant to enforce its bylaws because it is such a relational group. And so there's a balance of taking a stand and enforcing those bylaws, and the impact that they feel that has on community organizations. So there may be a model where we're talking about appointed members, advisors to the appointed members, which are folks that are not formally appointed and they can participate as desired. And what might that structure look like, in order to allow folks to participate at different levels, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jen, I have a couple questions. The first one is just logistical, and in the RFP, it says the deadline for questions is May 1st, but there's no time. Is it the end of the day, or?
And I'll take them through 5 p.m. Yep.
Okay. And then the second question is this RFP to, I guess, fulfill or replace an existing position, or is this a whole new kind of process within the EDI?
We currently have a limited facilitation contract, and the city requires that we do open and competitive. We can do up to 2 extensions, and then we go back to an open and competitive process. That was extended all the way through all of our opportunities to extend it. And so as we've come back out, even though we are replacing that, we are adding to it, both in dollars and in scope. And though the dollar amount is below the threshold for doing a full solicitation, we opted to do the full solicitation to preserve the ability to increase the amount of the contract if we end up needing to do so, either pre-negotiation or during the, I mean, it's on call, so we don't think we would need to before, during the negotiation for the original signing. But if something new comes up during the duration of the contract that would require that we amend it and increase the amount, the full solicitation process preserves our ability to do that. And that's just because so much is unknown. And in particular with the city's budget cycle, we just don't really know what will be asked of EDI or the board as we respond to the evolving budget situation. And we do know that there's going to be a need to do some strategic planning work to re-envision EDI fundamentally. And so whether that would be separate or would we roll it in here and onboard a partner to this, all of these things, we're just trying to maintain our ability to be responsive and agile as things emerge. And knowing that all of that would come with a conversation with whoever signs this about, we're asking you for the capacity to do this body of work. So additional work, we would be open to going out and doing other solicitations if it would exceed that team's capacity. And that would not be a consideration with award to this. We would award this based on what we know now for this. But, in full transparency, it's a moving target for us.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions I can answer? We will work to get this posted, but also you can, reach back out and get in touch, jenna.franklin@seattle.gov. If questions come up through the end of the Q&A deadline, I'd be happy to answer those. And then we'll post all of this online. And we thank you for attending, and we really appreciate your interest in EDI and supporting our board and helping us sort of become our next version of self. Yeah, and our community grantee partners are going to be very appreciative as well.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you,
you.
everyone. Have a great afternoon.
You too.
Bye. Thanks. Take care.